Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Project. I'm your host, Duke Ong with Tri-City Equity Group. Today we have Brent Kawakami on the show. I'm a passive investor in one of his deals that he sponsored, a 114 unit in Atlanta, Georgia. With me is my co-host, Vince Gethings.
Hey, Duke. Excited for this call. Brent definitely shared some nuggets on being an operator. It's great to sit down and talk with somebody that's a few years ahead of you on the same trajectory that you're on. So definitely some good things specifically on property management, on some tricks to make sure that your property managers are staying accountable to the property and what they're supposed to be doing. So definitely listen to that, as well as some of his tips on reducing expenses on some of his multifamily properties. So definitely some awesome wisdom from Brent on this episode.
Welcome to another episode of Cash Flow Project. Today we have a special guest, Brent Kawakami. Brent has been investing in multifamily since 2015 and has invested in over 600 multifamily units in Texas, Georgia, Kansas, and Ohio. He started investing in real estate in 2012, buying, rehabbing, and renting single-family houses in the Dallas, Texas area. Brent has a BS in electrical engineering from the University of Texas at Austin and is a registered professional engineer in the state of Texas. He has worked as a consulting engineer in the power energy industry, leading numerous multi-million-dollar projects, and has been responsible for the development of over $1 billion in construction projects. Brent, welcome to the show.
How's it going, guys?
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Good to talk to my buddy Duke here. So, and my new buddy Vince. So.
All right. So let's just jump right in. How did you get started in your journey to earn passive cash flow?
Yeah. So, I mean, you went through some of my background there, but probably how I got started. So it's like a lot of guys, right? You read that dumb purple book, by that guy Kiyosaki, right? That tends to be the red pill, I guess, to open up the matrix, so to speak. And so that was sort of my first thing. So like I started kind of jumping into a lot of other stuff like, okay, how do I actually figure this passive income stuff out? So I got into like dividend stock investing. I got into peer-to-peer lending, started online businesses, precious metal investing, got into infinite banking, if you know what that is, which I still do. And of course, like we all settle on real estate, right? That ends up being, you figure that out. Where there's that stat that's like, 90% of new millionaires are created through real estate or something like that. So inevitably, that's kind of what got me hooked. And so I started single family rentals back in 2011 and just kind of progressed for there. Right. And so that was kind of the path. Slow but steady.
So how did you decide on real estate over all those other streams?
Yeah, I think, what you find is, as you're doing all those and you do more research, right, and you kind of get into the podcasts and the books and all that, you realize that beside, with real estate being all those, the tax advantages, the cash flow, the appreciation, all those things like just line up, right? And then ultimately that's what like has the light bulb in your head that, oh, okay, this is how you get there, right? So for me, it was kind of starting off, educating myself that way. And then I got hooked up with some local education groups in RIAs. And that's how kind of, I got set on real estate really.
Nice. So you recently quit your high-paying W-2 jobs. So congratulations, by the way.
Thanks, man.
So when did you realize that it was a possibility?
So I had slowly been building things up for a while, right? So like, because I got a couple years into my career and, it was sort of a thing where, I generally enjoyed what I was doing, but it was sort of I didn't want to do it for 40 years type of thing. It's probably like a lot of us, like you get, and a lot of it's seeing coworkers and older folks. You're like, man, I do not want to, be doing this 30, 40 years from now. Right. I'd rather, and I saw a lot of folks that were like, they probably, dedicated their career and at the detriment of other things like, their kids, right. Or their marriages, marriages being plural, or, they're retiring and they didn't have any hobbies because that's all they did. So, to be honest, that kind of scared me. So which got me on that path. And so, it was slow, right? I started doing this in, like I said, 2011-ish. So it was several years and it was kind of a slow one rental at a time thing. And then kind of what was the impetus for, hey, I could actually do this was my current partners now really wanted me to come work with them full time. And that was really the kind of the jump that says, hey, I feel, I built things up. I have enough of a cushion. I have a new opportunity that I can jump on. And so that's kind of what pushed me there. So.
Yeah. One of the, you said something that kind of sparked a memory of mine. So I read the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, went through Covey's course. It was like a 5-day course back in like 2000 and whatever. And in there, he has a video, they talk about corporate ladders. He said the worst feeling in the world is to spend your entire life, 20, 40 years, climbing the ladder in your company and realizing it's leaning against the wrong wall.
Yeah.
So if that, like when I heard that, like I got like chills. And I was like, holy crap, like that's me. Like, I don't know. Cause like you said, you see the guys that are, the men and women that are, a decade or two ahead of you in your career field. And you're like, really, that's what I got to look forward to. Like, some of them are very happy, but a lot of them, like you said, what did they have to give up to get there?
Yeah.
That was a huge paradigm shift for me. Was like, man, do I really want to put the next 20 years into this and realize that, I'm at the top of the wrong ladder.
Yeah. No, I love that, man. I love that. And for me, it's the right thing for some people, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but like, I think it goes back to like what you personally enjoy doing. Right. Mm-hmm. And I know like for me, when I was working, I kind of realized that and sort of, it's like, hey, at first I was all gung ho. I want to climb the corporate ladder. And over time it's like, I'd rather be happy, and to be quite honest with you, I've never really said this in public, but, I actively turned down, jobs, right? I actively didn't want to be put in positions where I knew where, I was going to have to put in, 20 more hours a week, or have a ton of more stress and responsibility just cause, it's sort of like, hey, would you rather be happy, type of thing. So I totally align with that analogy.
Definitely. So what were the biggest challenges in deciding to quit your W-2?
So obviously financial piece is one, right? I mean, that's always one for sure, but you kind of get over that type of thing. I think one of the interesting things with leaving was sort of how to go about it and sort of jump because, as someone, so I'd been with my my last company for, over a decade. And, especially when, folks are ingrained in it, it's a huge shock, right? Hopefully, you're good at what you did and, people liked you while you were there, but like when it's sort of a, hey, I'm going to leave for another opportunity. And in my instance, it's completely not, I was an engineer, right? And I'm going to basically a totally different industry. It's kind of a shock for folks. And, and sometimes it's kind of sad, to others as well as to you, to me personally. So I think that was definitely a challenge and sort of how to navigate that, cause it's, it's a lot of awkward conversations too.
Yeah, for sure.
So
what was your financial freedom number and how did you come up with that?
Freedom. So I'll be honest, I'm a little weird in that I didn't really have one. And I know that sounds really bad, cause most folks are like, hey, you need to have some like definitive goal, right? Or some number. And that could be like, monthly income or a number of units. But I really didn't have that. And I'll be honest, I think it's because I take the philosophy of sort of like the right size business or number will find you. I read this book. So he talks about, if you've ever read the book Profit First by, it's Mike, I can't even pronounce his name, Mike McCalvitz or something. But he talks about how, like, it's like we'll always hear about people have these big, hairy, audacious goals, right? Or 10X, right? We always, always hear that, right? But what you find with a lot of folks is like, that's completely arbitrary. Like for many times it's like, oh, I'm going to make 20 grand a month, or I'm going to have, a bajillion units under my name. But, the reality is that sometimes for some folks, that's kind of inappropriate. Your business and your, the number you make really should just support your lifestyle and your purpose. And back to what we're talking about, your enjoyment, right? Not some random number, cause it's just arbitrary. And it, going bigger just for the sake of bigger is not, not always the best thing. There's a real estate guy who likes to say bigger is not better. Better is better. So like, and then too, like I've seen folks who like have set those goals like that, and then they're striving that and it makes them lose sanity, or like they make decisions they wouldn't necessarily make. Right. Like if your goal is to do like 1,000 units in 1 year, like to me, well, the right number might be 0, as bad as that sounds, but the right number of deals might be 0, just for whatever reason. So, for me, it wasn't necessarily a goal like that. It was more creating sort of the lifestyle and the process that I enjoy. And then it's sort of like, hey, I love the chase, and it's sort of that Gary Vaynerchuk stuff you hear, right? I enjoy the chase and growing versus like I'm trying to hit some number, if that makes sense. So sorry, that's a completely different answer than probably you're expecting, but that's the way I approach it.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense, because just back to that ladder thing, right? Like you don't want to be like just leaning up this ladder against this certain number of units or whatever, but then it's not really what you want, right? So
yeah, it could be like, I get to 10,000 units and then making, I don't know, just make up a number, 20 grand a month, but I hate my life. Or I had to create my own management company because of that, or now I'm on 10 different calls every day, and that type of thing. So I think it's being mindful of all that stuff.
Yeah. So what is your why for building passive cash flow?
My why? So everyone says family, right? Obviously that's like the typical thing. And that's the case for me, right? I have a wife and I have a little son. But I think for me, it's been simple. It's kind of, I don't want to be like everyone else, as weird as it's kind of whatever that sounds. We talked about, seeing other folks you work with and not wanting that necessarily. But it was sort of, for me, it was like, I don't want to be mediocre. I don't want to have, the same sort of conventional, life that other folks have. It's sort of, there's another book or another guy, his name's MJ DeMarco. I think his book's called The Millionaire Fast Lane or something like that. But basically it's like, hey, if you accept conventional wisdom and do the same things everyone else is doing, you're going to get the same result. Right. So that was where, and I say all that just because, that's really been for me, my why. It's sort of like, I don't want sort of the typical, average thing that I'll see a lot of other folks do as whatever. It's not to be whatever about it.
Well, that's why the 4-hour work week is so powerful, right? He opens you up to the, like this whole world of like, what do you mean? Yeah, of course you can go rent, a furnished apartment in Milan for a month and take your family, right? Like and you most people think of like these super like ultra wealthy people doing this stuff, and it's like Tim Ferriss is like, no, like you can do it. Like it's not that hard. Here's 300 pages, 400 pages on exactly how to live this super unique, purposeful life. But it's very similar to sounds like Millionaire Fast Lane is like same type of paradigm shift there. Yeah.
It's sort of like, and you have to find like what that thing is for you, right? Maybe maybe not everyone wants to sit on a beach in Milan, maybe someone else wants to do something else, or maybe you enjoy, like maybe you just enjoy all this, grinding and doing real estate and all that stuff, right? Like I personally find enjoyment out of it, as sick as that sounds, so that's what it's about, right? It's really finding that, what's going to bring you the most fulfillment out of it, so.
Yeah. So tell me about the first deal you sponsored as a GP.
As a GP, okay. So the first deal would have been, you invested in that deal actually, dude.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking about it.
Yeah. So that was a 100+ unit deal in Atlanta, Georgia. Class C deal. This was a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, probably now. Very, very sort of your cookie cutter, sort of syndication multifamily deal. Was listed at the time, if you can believe that, it was a listed deal. Actually didn't get it, awarded it the first time. And then the first group who got awarded it didn't follow through the contract, so they came back to us, and we got a shot at it. So closed that. Duke was an investor, which appreciate. There's definitely been challenges. Like every deal has its challenges, but right now we're in a really good position in terms of occupancy and performance, and I'm hoping we can do a capital event. I was planning on doing a capital event this year, but we'll see how COVID ends up affecting it. But value-wise, we've definitely done really well on that property for sure.
Nice. So yeah, how has COVID affected your collections and all that?
So we were talking a little bit before we hopped on the call, but I think the reality is going into April, everybody in March, across the board, in the multifamily industry had no idea what to expect, right? Like the reality was like no one knew, right? And to be frank, like the group I work with, has a few thousand units across different states, and the reality is no property manager knows exactly what to do. They're figuring this stuff out as well, right? So going in, obviously there are a lot of blocking and tackling things of, how are we going to maximize collections? How are we going to work with residents? And, how are we going to do all that and be safe and, not endanger people, that type of thing. So with all of that said, I think a reality, if you look at all the stats across the multifamily space, collections didn't suffer a huge ton, right? I mean, on the low end, maybe you were 75-80% of collections, and, some folks got all the way up to 100 where they were a month ago. So things didn't fall off a cliff. I guess we'll see how May goes. But there goes why you have reserves and you do other things to make sure you're stress tested and everything. So fortunately, properties I'm involved with, haven't fallen off a cliff, and knock on wood, I hope it stays that way.
What kind of strategies are you guys implementing, to mitigate collection loss or work with tenants and all that?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, like communication residence is always important, but I think it gets amplified during this time, right? And so there's definitely an encouragement of like, hey, if you lose your job or your hours are cut because of all what's going on, like let's get ahead of it, right? Let us know. Let's start having a conversation. Let's help you figure out, okay, who is still hiring, right? While certain industries got killed right now, there are others who, if you were in I say jokingly, if you're in the hand sanitizer business, you're probably doing really well right now. But, Amazon and Walmart and all these other places are hiring tons of people, right? There's obviously a lot of assistance programs going on that you're helping folks with. Unemployment, helping people get figured with that, and with some of the helicopter money that the government's been throwing around. I mean, there's folks who get on unemployment are making more than they did when they were working. Yeah. Which, that's a different discussion, but that it obviously helps helps people pay their expenses, which includes their rent. So there's stuff like that. Obviously, for folks who are doing that, being flexible, with folks that you probably wouldn't have maybe necessarily, maybe you were iron fisted before, but you're being a little more flexible now, for sure. There's things like not, trying to minimize expenses where you can, right? Maybe it's, hey, if we don't have an application and someone ready to move in, we don't have to turn that unit right away. Or, maybe there's other things you could trim, right? Just to make sure you're in a reasonable cash position. So it's kind of a combination of stuff like that. I wish I had the secret key, but like I said before, I think the reality is everyone's trying to figure out how to navigate it for sure.
Yeah, we definitely did like a triage for maintenance requests, like emergency only type things.
Yeah.
That was like one of the first things we did. One of the best things we did was actually a raffle. So, we use our communication channels to get out to the residents that if you pay your rent by, in full by the 1st or by the end of the grace period, you're entered in for a raffle, and we do like, 2 or 3 different like $50 gift cards.
Yeah.
And then do that. We did that last month for April, and I think our collections went up like $3 or $4 grand overnight.
Yeah.
As soon as he sent that mass text out through Appfolio.
Yeah.
So that's probably been like, if there was like one thing that probably helped out, that was probably it. But we also did a lot of research on all the federal, state, county, city charities and helping agencies. Did flyers and like, okay, here's the POCs, here's the the name, the email, the phone number, posted on every single door. Like if you're, best thing you can do is communicate with us. That way you can do payment plans, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's just with the communication bit, just clarifying what can happen, because there's a lot of bad information going around. Like the whole like, don't pay your rent, they can't do anything, right? It's like, well, we will after, when the court's back open, like you still owe us that amount. Like we're gonna recoup it somehow. So
and then too, like, hey, there's expenses that still have to be paid on the property, right? I mean, it's like there's still common area lighting. There's still landscaping. There's still,
the debt, right? So
there's debt.
we're not getting no love for, our lenders, that payment's still due. Right. So
fortunately, at least from what properties I've seen, you definitely heard of the rent strike thing. So knock on wood, haven't seen that yet, but sometimes your hope is like just with, the better side of humanity, right? It's like people try to do the right thing, right? Mm-hmm. They try to pay their bills. So, and then, I don't know, I guess depending on where your property's at, I know you guys, like El Paso's example was in Texas. I'm here. I mentioned the property earlier is in Georgia. Those states are starting to open up a little bit. Yeah. So, your hope is that
hopeful, or optimistic, I guess is a better word.
Yeah. So it's good.
All right. Is that me, Duke?
Yep.
All right. So I got a few questions. So I am the operator, so to speak, in our group. So I do all the day-to-day operations, a lot of the managing the managers. So what are your best practices for managing the managers? Managing, the third-party managers.
Yeah. And I would say, as a general statement, what's interesting working with my partners and different property managers, the reality is you're never, and it sounds bad, but you're never like 100% happy with your property manager. Every property manager has certain things that, maybe you wish were improved. And it's like with anything, right? And I think a lot of it's just, it's a tough business, right? Property management it's a thankless. Have you ever heard like Ken McElroy will say like, as a property manager, it sucks because you do a good job on a property, then the owner sells it and you're fired. If you do a poor job on the property, they're going to fire you. So it's a tough business. So, but we're fortunate that, there's a lot of good ones out there. But I say all that just to preface that. And so I think, a lot of the few things we do that, is not sexy or not, not out of the ordinary, but we have a weekly call every week for every property with the property manager, the regional and the person in the office. We're running through everything, right? Where we at on occupancy, on collections, on all that stuff. And we're doing it more on a, almost on a daily basis now, given the current situation. But, that's obviously first practice one. You're reviewing monthly financials every month, right? That PM sending a monthly report with everything from the balance sheet all the way to the general ledger. And it's not to say you're like picking everything apart, but you're definitely reviewing that, you're spot checking stuff, you're questioning things, that type of thing. There's definitely in-person visits as well that happen. And if you have boots on the ground locally, that's helpful because you don't have to be the one that always does it, especially if you're living in Hawaii and the property is in Texas. But it helps, to get eyes on the property on a somewhat regular basis. I know personally, generally I would like to see the property at least once a quarter, as a general statement. And then I may have other folks visiting it on a more frequent basis. And it may be planned, it may not be. Sometimes it'll be a surprise visit and manager doesn't even know I'm coming, and it's sort of I don't want you to know I'm coming. Hopefully I don't walk in and you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, or walk on the property and the place is trashy, that type of thing. Or
the other side of it where you get the dog and pony show, like, oh, the owners are coming, let's dress everything up. And
yeah, exactly.
Like,
I gotta put my suit on,
yeah, it's all big scripted, like I hate that more than anything.
Yeah, for sure. And then, some of that, there's that, and then even having folks secret shop,
Mm-hmm.
you do that on a new acquisition, but it could be also having someone, secret shop your property. We actually did that on another property I had, and we ended up letting that manager go. And to be frank, we weren't happy with the presence the person had in the office. They didn't stand when the person walked in the door. They weren't as friendly as we would have liked. Didn't do a great job of selling the property, that type of thing. So, it's not to say you're like always, you gotta nickel and dime and, micromanage it, but you're definitely keeping an eye on them for sure, as you're going through it. And then too, when you find a good one, like you do everything you can to hold them, especially the office manager. I would say, regardless of the quality of the total, the property management company, the person you have in your office is 100% what's going to make or break you. And when you have a good one, it's like, do everything you can to keep that person.
Yeah, it was definitely the weekly calls. I think that is, we call them the weekly pulse checks. That's definitely like one of the best practices that I got from my coaches. But with the secret shoppers, do you just hire somebody like a company? Because I know like retail, you can go like hire a company to go secret shop stores. Is that like the same thing, or you just?
So I know there's companies that do that. We've had a combination of we ask someone else within the management company to do it, or B, more likely not. So, and this goes to where we're like, you're networking and being part of investment groups and things like that.
Yeah.
Where I have people I know in that market that can go do that. So that's where, sort of that boots on the ground, so to speak. And it doesn't necessarily have to someone who's in the deal, so to speak. But, if you're building that network and you have a group of people that, you can rely on, I think that's real powerful, right? Because it's, I've had instances where, even someone in my network's in town there, he's not even there. And it's like, hey, you want me to go drive by your property? Yeah, go for it. So the network is definitely key for that stuff as well.
Nice. All right. So what is your favorite ninja trick for increasing NOI, either by increasing income or decreasing expenses?
Ninja trick. I wish I had lots of ninja tricks. So we're actually doing this on the property Duke's investing on. So what we're doing on that property is we're actually going to be getting off the regulated lighting that's there that does the external lights for the common areas. Mm-hmm. Just because like the regulated utility lighting is really expensive as a general statement. And so we're going to go in and put in exterior LEDs across the property. And so at least the initial calculations there from what we've seen is we're essentially going to cut the electric bill almost in half on a monthly basis. And then over the course of a year, it'll actually, from the savings, will actually have paid for that particular improvement. And so obviously your utility savings is going to go down. I think on that instance, we're going to save like, I'll just say $18K on an annual basis. And so you put like a 6 or 7 cap on that. It's a good increase in value. So that's one. We've tried stuff examples. So there's companies out there that will do protests for you on things like your trash bill, as well as your electric or your gas bill. So we've been kind of looking at stuff like that, where companies on your behalf will go to your other utilities, like whoever you're using for trash pickup, whoever you're getting your electric from. And it depends on, how, what your local, the local situation is on how those services are set up, but they can actually go protest those services or find more competitive services for you. And it's no money out of your pocket, essentially, and can shave savings off it. So I'll stick with that theme sort of on the utility side.
Yeah. So that's a new thing for me for Texas. When we moved into that market, where there's entire firms that will go and just protest property taxes. Yeah. And then like you just do either like a 50-50 split or whatever they can save. And I was learning about that. I'm like, that's a thing. Like you try to do that in like other markets, the assessor or the city will be like, what are you doing? Like, that's the bill. Like, get out of here.
Yeah. And you can do that in a lot of other places too. So like we do that in Georgia as an example. So there's firms that'll do that. That's and it's great, right? You should be doing that every year.
Excited about that. The LED lighting, that was something we did right out of the gate. All external lighting, switched up to LED. And then my favorite ninja trick is the water.
The water savings.
Yeah, putting water aerators in all the faucets and low flow shower heads. Yeah. And replacing all the toilet valves in the tanks, the flapper valve, like right out of the gate. That's like my number one ninja trick.
Yeah, if you do that, like those are like, all these things are like instant NOI boosts, right? So those are always good.
Yeah, the aerators, you buy in bulk off like Alibaba or Amazon or something like that, and it was like a 2 or 3 month payback, like break even on those. Mm-hmm. So it was a no brainer. Awesome. So do you use VAs, virtual assistants? Because I know as operators, as they're still like, for me, and I don't know if you went through this too, you're still doing your W-2. You got a couple properties that you're operating, and you're just task saturated. Have you used VAs to help offload and delegate some of that?
So I've used VAs for other businesses before. I have not used them here in the real estate side. I know some folks get really tricky with it, for sure. I think for me, like when I was managing the W-2 and the real estate on the side, I think just, as dumb as this sounds, I was just sort of put my head down and like grind it out type of thing. Yeah. It's like lunch hour, early in the morning, evenings, whatever it is. Right. So, to be honest, I don't know a lot of folks who have maybe implemented that in a very successful manner, in all honesty, for whatever reason. It works for some folks, but I think one thing I would say though, that I have seen folks get into is you end up causing more work for yourself trying to set all that systems up rather than getting the work done. Yeah. If that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And if it was a regular employee and you're trying to build a system, like the whole franchise model, like build the system and teach somebody, it's a lot of work as well doing that. But when they're in person, it seems like it's a lot easier. Cause I've trained, hundreds of people in my job. But a lot of the systems are already built for you. So you have to like build the system and then teach them the system. Yeah. And stuff like that. So, well, thanks for no help on that one.
I wish I had a better answer for it. I'm the dumb engineer who's like, all right, just let me get it done. Get her done. Right?
That's where I'm at. I've been trying to like figure out what I can delegate. I've spent like all weekend, researching VAs. And I think, they'd be very effective on like one-off projects. Like you find like one VA that's really good at, say, like skip tracing. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, here's the demographics and here's the filters, go find me a list of, properties and buyers, sellers. So like those one-off are like very enclosed things, but it's like my day-to-day operations. It's like, there's so many shades of gray and like blurred lines of like what I can delegate, what I can't, like what's going to cause more work for me just to verify they did it right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, that's why you have partners too, right? That's the other part of it is like getting in a group of folks, having partners so that you're not the only one that kind of can take it. Right. So just, what I'm saying is make Duke do it. basically.
Yeah, all right. Hear that, dude? It's all on you now.
Just delegate it to him. He'll take care of it.
Yeah. All right. So I guess my last question is, and switching gears completely, is so I'm not sure how much of this you do as far as like the money raising side. If you have investors that are potential investors that are interested, but they're hesitant, they're on the fence. What do you do, or how do you help show them the power of multifamily to get them to land on your side of the fence versus this is too risky, I don't understand it, and they just kind of retreat back to whatever they're used to, mutual funds or just subpar investment vehicles. Yeah.
And I have, I do raise capital as well. And that's the $1 million question, because we all struggle with that for sure, which is probably why you're asking. I think, so there's several things that come to mind, obviously. I think one thing that's real important is, and obviously there's the continual stuff of like, hey, you got to have your drip campaigns. You got to be constantly touching people. There's all that stuff that like you constantly hear. But I think there's definitely power in sort of like being able to say no. And what I mean by that is, so when you're approaching different investments, right, and you're kind of looking at it as this is an opportunity, right, and that in reality, someone else, that person's missing out if they don't, if they're not in, right, and you're kind of approaching things from that mentality. But then being able to say like, hey, you can say no, right? I don't have to be desperate to to get someone to hop in that, to invest, right? Or to hop in the deal. And it's a hard thing, because like, if you're raising capital, like you're trying to raise capital, right? It's hard to say turning people away, but I definitely think that's, and I don't have a ninja tactic there, but that's definitely the approach from that regard. Because the reality is people will get to that point when they're ready, right? And sometimes it's like, no matter what you say, you're not going to convince someone, right? Necessary. But the fact that you can say no to them, I think is very powerful, because it is an opportunity, right? And it's sort of like, hey, I don't necessarily need, and I hate saying this way, but it's like, I don't necessarily need your money, right? I think that's a very powerful position to be in if you can put yourself in that position.
Yeah. No, I understand. So it's usually like, I like the ones that are like, they're just clearly like, no, like I'm out, this is not for me. And I'm like, all right, note taken, put the note in the active campaign saying that, this is just not for them. And, and then still keep them on the drip, and, maybe they'll come back in a few years. But like the ones that are just like, they're on the fence and they're just like, I don't know. And then you're just like, how much time and energy
are you spending on that?
Right? Are you putting on that and cultivating that relationship and doing that? But then, you're just like, okay, we're good on this one. Just, kind of just say no politely, but leave the door open, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I've seen people struggle with that, because like, especially if it's a large amount of funds that person's looking at, right? Because then it's sort of like, I've heard it called chasing whales, like people would chase these whales, and then they get further along, and they've been kind of strung along, and then at the end it's a no, and then you're like, oh shoot. Now you're really in trouble, right? So
I've felt that.
Yeah. So definitely being in the position where it's like, okay, that's fine. I can, no problem, no worries, move on,
So I guess the goal is to raise, 130, 150% of what you need. That's kind of what your target is.
Yeah. I think it depends on project for sure. More the better, obviously.
All right. Well, that's it for me.
So how has a mistake or a failure set you up for later success?
Oh gosh. So I will say, and I don't mean this to be like whatever, but I'm very fortunate in that in my real estate career, I haven't had like any massive major blow up yet, knocking on wood. But, you hear these stories about like, oh, I lost everything, or like, whatever. Right. And I'm more of the approach, like, yeah, you're going to, obviously you want to learn from those things, but like, I'm going to do everything possible not to do that, especially, in these larger multifamily deals, right? Because there's some extra zeros there. There's other people's money on the line. So like, everything from having the right people around you, having the right mentor, making sure you're extra diligent on everything. Yeah, stuff's going to happen and things you don't expect. But I think it's really like doing everything possible so that, you know, you don't fail, right? I think I was talking, so Duke, you know, Lane, you both probably know Lane real well. But we've had this discussion before. It's like, there's almost this selection bias because all you hear about is the stories of like people who failed, you know, it's like, oh, that made me better. But then you don't hear about like, no, there's a lot of people who like just slow and steady. Like, you know, it's that whole Warren Buffett thing, right? Don't roll one, don't lose money, you know? So, not to say there haven't been stuff.
Rule 1.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Don't forget rule 1. I forgot rule 2 there. Rule 2 there. Right. But yeah, so I'm fortunate in that regard. I would say one thing that I have learned from like real estate stuff is like listen to my wife more. As weird as that sounds, and she's not involved in the real estate side of things, but she definitely has like a read on me. And so I think there's something to be said about having that outside perspective of being able to like read me and my emotions and like how I'm reacting to stuff. So I think that's one thing I have, you know, even when it comes to the real estate stuff, it's like, okay, I need to listen to my wife. So.
Like how so? Like what's an example of that?
So I had when I was doing single family rentals, I had a property that I had a reason to move out. And I was thinking about selling it. And so I kind of was on the fence about it, but it was sort of like the easier thing to do at the time was just, all right, I'm just going to get another resident in there, you know, and just turn the thing. And my wife was very much, no, I think you need to sell it. I think you're at that point where you're over it. And this is kind of when I was transitioning more toward multifamily, but I didn't really listen. And of course, right, I ended up like my worst resident I've ever had. You know, and it wasn't bad. Like they still pay the rent, but it was definitely a lot of brain damage, would you say? And so I ended up selling it after. But definitely like if I had listened, I would have known that like, hey, I was kind of fed up with sort of the single family, you know, landlord life at that time. And maybe I didn't realize it, but my wife knew I was. So that's an example.
Nice.
Got it. So what is the best book that you recommend?
Best book. So I don't read a ton of books now. I listen to a billion podcasts, but I would say there's 2 books I really like that I can think of. One is So Getting Things Done by David Allen, often called GTD. That's probably the only book I can say I've read over 10 years ago, and I still do stuff on a daily basis that I got from that book, which is, you know, really huge. So that's one. And then I think the other one, and this kind of goes with the theme we talked about before about fulfillment, it's called Happy Money. I think the tagline is like the science of happier spending or something like that. But it talks about how, it's real simple, like gives you like these 4 different principles of, you know, how you spend your money on different things. And it sounds real simple when you hear it, but it goes through that and why are sort of the studies that have been done or why that brings you more fulfillment for every dollar you spend. And it's really about being more mindful about your spending, really. That's going to bring you happiness. And so like, it sounds real simple. Like, okay, when you're spending money, spend money on stuff that saves you time or headache you don't want to do. Right. As an example. So it sounds real simple, but you're like, okay, if you really hate changing your oil, just pay someone $20 to do it. Right. Or, I like to use the example. We have tolls here in Texas. Like people will get so upset about having to pay $2, you know, or whatever it is, right, to go through a toll. And yeah, you got to be mindful of your budget and everything, but it's like paying funds to like save yourself 20 minutes a headache in traffic, way worth it. Right. And from your happiness quotient or your bucket's going to be way better when you're doing things like that. So that's just one of the principles, but I'd say that's definitely a book I recommend to a lot of people. Happy Money.
Got it. You hear that, everybody? So if you don't like paying your tolls, just don't. I said so.
No, I said pay.
It doesn't make you happy.
What I'm saying is pay it so you know you don't you save yourself the time. It could be anything, right? Maybe you enjoy certain stuff, There's other.
the fast pass. I don't know if they do that in Texas.
Yeah, they do.
Like the fast pass is like once a month. You don't even think about it. Just load, auto drafts whenever it's, running low. It'll just fill itself up, and it's like this little thing that sits on the windshield.
Yeah, we do that. We have it here. One thing, so one hack or thing that came out of the book too, I can remember. So one hack was try to prepay stuff as much as you can. And that could mean like gift cards or, whatever. And the reason is because like psychologically, when you're actually using it, or it feels like it's free. And so you actually enjoy that experience more. If that makes sense. So that's why, like, say like you're using miles for a trip, or it's like, even if you have a gift card in a Starbucks, right? And you're using that, even if you paid for it before, right? The experience, it feels like it's free when you're actually doing it, So from a mental standpoint, you enjoy it. So
interesting.
Yeah. Check it out. It's a good book.
All right. Well, we want to be respectful of your time. So as we wrap this up, any ask or requests for our audience, and how can people reach out to you?
Yeah. So best way to reach out to me is email. So my email is brent@thinkmultifamily.com. Brent@thinkmultifamily.com. And then, that's the best way to reach out.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, and have a wonderful day.
Nope. Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Yeah, thanks. Bye. Wow, Duke, that was an awesome show. Brent definitely gave us some ninja tricks, as we have now coined them. Specifically the secret shopping, his own PMs. That was a huge plus I never even thought of, to use secret shoppers, and also to have another PM, property manager, on standby, ready to take the reins if something went south really quickly on one of his locations. Just be able to have a relationship already cultivated with another property manager in that market, to hurry up and pick up the reins in that community, so there's not mitigate the disruption for the residents and the operations of that property. So that was a huge plus, and note I took away personally as an operator from that conversation.
Yeah, and super inspiring podcast too for all the people that are seeking financial freedom and eventually quitting their W-2. If you're interested in connecting with us, go to tricityequity.com to learn more. To connect with like-minded investors, join our Facebook group, Honolulu Multifamily and More. And if you found value in this podcast, please share and give us a rating and review on iTunes. See you next time.